Katherine became almost at once so absorbed in the work for Dr. Braithwaite that she had very little time to spend with us. There was another reason for her absence, of which she spoke half apologetically one night about a week after her arrival. "There's a girl in the room next to mine who keeps me awake by her moaning," she said. "I don't get half enough sleep, and the result is that when I get in from my work I'm so dead tired I tumble into bed instead of coming over here as I'm longing to do. The housekeeper says she's a student of some kind, and that she's really ill enough to need a physician, although she goes to her school or work each morning. I've only caught glimpses of her, but she strikes me as being rather a stunning looking creature. I wish she'd moan in the daytime, though. Some night I'm going in there and give her a sleeping powder. Joking aside, I'm rather anxious about her. Whatever is the matter with her, physical or mental, it's a real trouble, and I wish I could help her." The real Katherine Sonnot spoke in the last sentence. Like many nurses, she had a superficial lightness of manner, behind which she often concealed the wonderful sympathy with and understanding for suffering which was hers. I knew that if the poor unknown sufferer needed aid or friendship, she would receive both from Katherine. It was shortly after this talk that I noticed the extraordinary intimacy which seemed to have sprung up between Katherine and Lillian. I seemed to be quite set aside, almost forgotten, when Katherine came to the apartment, and there was such an air of mystery about their conversation. If they were talking together and I came within hearing, they either abruptly stopped speaking or shifted the subject. I was just childish and weak enough from my illness to be a trifle chagrined at being so left out, and I am afraid my chagrin amounted almost to sulkiness sometimes. Lillian and Katherine, however, appeared to notice nothing, and their mysterious conferences increased in number as the days went on. There came a day at last when my morbidness had increased to such an extent that I felt there was nothing more in the world for me, and that there was no one to care what became of me. I was huddled in one of Lillian's big chairs before the fireplace in the living room, drearily watching the flames, through eyes almost too dim with tears to see them. I could hear the murmur of voices in the hall, where Katherine and Lillian had been standing ever since Katherine's arrival a few minutes before. Then the voices grew louder, there was a rush of feet to the door, a hush from Lillian, and then, pale, emaciated, showing the effects of the terrible ordeal through which he had gone, my brother cousin, Jack Bickett, who, until Katherine came home, I had thought was dead, stood before me. "Oh, Jack, Jack, thank God, thank God!" As I saw my brother cousin Jack Bickett, whom I had so long mourned as dead, coming toward me in Lillian Underwood's living room, I stumbled to my feet, and with no thought of spectators or of anything save the fact that the best friend I had ever known had come back to me, I rushed into his arms and clung to him wildly, sobbing out all the heartache and terror that had been mine since Dicky had left me in so cruel and mysterious a manner. I felt as a little child might that had been lost and suddenly caught sight of its father or mother. The awful burden that had been mine lifted at the very sight of Jack's pale face smiling down at me. I knew that some way, somehow, Jack would straighten everything out for me. "There, there, Margaret." Jack's well-remembered tones, huskier, weaker by far than when I had last heard them, soothed me, calmed me. "Everything's going to come out all right. I'll see to it all. Sit down and let me hear all about it." There was an indefinable air of embarrassment about him which I could not understand at first. Then I saw beyond him the lovely flushed face of Katherine Sonnot, and in her eyes there was a faintly troubled look. I read it all in a flash. Jack was embarrassed because I had so impetuously embraced him before Katherine. I withdrew myself from his embrace abruptly, and drew a chair for him near my own. "Are you sure you are fully recovered?" I asked, and I saw Jack look wonderingly at the touch of formality in my tone. "No, I cannot say that," he returned gravely, "but I am so much better off than so many of the other poor chaps who survived that I have no right to complain. Mine was a body wound, and while I shall feel its effects on my general health for years, perhaps all my life, yet I am not crippled." His tone was full of thankfulness, and all my pettiness vanished at the sudden, swift vision of what he must have endured. The next moment he had turned my thoughts into a new channel. "Margaret," he said gravely, "I am terribly distressed to hear from Katherine that your husband has gone away in such a strange manner." So she had already told him. The little pang of unworthy jealousy came back, but I banished it. "Now there must be no more time lost," he went on. "You have had no man to look after things for you. But remember now, your old brother Jack is on the job. First I must know everything that occurred on that last day. Did you notice anything extraordinary in his demeanor on that last morning you saw him?" This was the old Jack, going directly to the root of the matter, wasting no time on his own affairs or feelings when he saw a duty before him. I felt the old sway of his personality upon me, and answered his questions as meekly as a child might have done. "He was just the same as he had been every morning since my accident," I returned. Jack thought a long minute, then began again. "Tell me everything that happened that day, every visitor you had. Don't omit the most trifling thing," he commanded. He listened attentively as I recalled Harry Underwood's visit and Robert Gordon's. At my revelation that Robert Gordon had said he was my father, his calm, judicial manner broke into excitement. "Your father!" he exclaimed, and then, after a pause, "I always knew he would come back some day. But go on. What happened when he told you he was your father?" I went on with the story of my struggle with my own rancor against my father, of my conviction that I had heard my mother's voice urging my reconciliation with him, of my father's first embrace and kisses, even of the queer, smothered sound like a groan and the slamming of a door which I had heard. Then I told him of my father's gift of money to me, which I had not yet touched, but I noticed that toward the last of my narrative Jack seemed preoccupied. "Did your husband come home to Marvin at all that day?" he asked. "No, he never came back from the city after he had once gone in, until evening." "But are you sure that this day he did not return to Marvin?" he persisted. "How do you know?" "Because no one saw him," I returned, "and he could hardly have come back without some one in the house seeing him." He said no more, as Lillian and Katherine came up just then, and the conversation became general. To my great surprise, I did not see him again after that first visit. Katherine explained to me that he had been called out of town on urgent business, but the explanation seemed to me to savor of the mysterious excitement that seemed to possess everybody around me. Finally one morning Lillian came to me, her face shining. "I want you to prepare to be very brave, Madge," she said. "There is some one coming whom I fear it will tax all your strength to meet." "Dicky," I faltered, beginning to tremble. "No, child, not yet," she said, her voice filled with pity, "but some one who has done you a great wrong. Grace Draper." Chapter 42.